Okay, so let's unpack this. We are starting our deep dive today with a source that uses a single, powerful personal memory, the moment personal computing arrived, to frame, well, one of the most sobering large-scale systems analyses of our modern digital existence.
It's a really remarkable piece of writing.
Yeah,
It is, because it sidesteps all the usual, the simplistic
right.
complaints.
It's not just algorithm bad or everyone's so mean online.
Exactly. It's not that. Instead, it uses a systems lens to analyze the environment itself. And it argues that the silence that so many, thoughtful professionals feel, it's not a failure of their ideas, it's a structural dynamic.
It's a structural dynamic,
Yeah.
and the source material just draws you in immediately with this
Mm.
this really vivid contrast. We start in December 1982. It's his 17th birthday. There's this huge box, and inside, the Timex Sinclair 1000.
Mm.
Now, for some of our listeners, especially younger ones, you really have to appreciate the friction of that technology.
Oh, absolutely. The author details the setup just beautifully, and those details they're so crucial to understanding the structural difference between then and now.
So what was it like?
Well, you had this humble, sub-$100 black wedge of plastic. The keyboard was a membrane keyboard, so you weren't really typing, you were pressing these little chiclets.
Right.
Your monitor, if you had one, was often a Kmart-branded black and white TV.
Wow.
And the storage, a cassette tape unit. A cassette tape, it would take like 5 minutes just to load a tiny program.
And it would probably fail on the second try.
Oh, it often did. And then there was the crowning jewel of the whole system.
The coveted 16 KB memory expansion module.
Yes, 16 kilobytes. It's almost nothing. Today, that's less than a tiny thumbnail image.
Mm-hmm.
But back then, that felt like owning the world's library. This setup required immense dedication.
It really did. And the experience, as the author describes it, it was one of just pure focus isolation.
Completely. He spent that winter translating basic code, and he was lifting it, line by line from these foreign British Sinclair ZX81 magazines.
So it was this silent, personal universe. The early conversation was between him and the machine.
That's it. He was alone, typing command after command, just waiting for the only real feedback he could get.
Which was that simple declarative statement, print hello world.
And that response, when it came, it wasn't with a big fanfare. It was just this lonely, rhythmic pulse of the blinking cursor on this fuzzy CRT screen.
And that image, that solitary signal in a completely silent universe, that's the emotional anchor for this entire analysis.
It has to be, because there was no network. There were no peers, no instant feedback. The work was its own reward. The process was the point.
Okay, and now for the cognitive whiplash. We fast forward 43 years, it's 2025.
Right.
The author is now a seasoned systems thinker, and he's carrying a device in his pocket, his smartphone, that has exponentially more processing power than the entire computer infrastructure of the Apollo space program.
It's just staggering to think about. And theoretically, he's connected to literally billions of other minds instantly over these high-speed networks.
Yeah. When this same person, with a whole lifetime of professional wisdom, posts a thoughtful, nuanced observation on systems thinking, to a major professional network like LinkedIn or on X or even on his curated Substack, what's the response he gets?
It's the same blinking cursor.
The same deafening silence. It's the ultimate paradox of hyperconnectivity. You're connected to everyone but heard by no one.
And this is where the analysis really pivots. It's a profound moment. Because for years, anyone who experienced this might internalize it, right? They'd think,
Isn't my content stale? Am I too niche? Have I just lost touch?
exactly, all those personal doubts. But the author, as a systems thinker, he just says, absolutely not. He refuses to accept this as a personal failure or some kind of coincidence. He demands a structural explanation.
Which gives us our mission statement for this deep dive. We're here to explore this core thesis that we're not just experiencing some minor shift in digital culture. We're living through what he calls a catastrophic phase change in the digital environment itself.
Yeah, that's a powerful term. And our goal for you, the listener, is to really understand the comprehensive systems analysis of why this deafening silence is so pervasive. We're going to unpack the mechanics of the digital world that have led to what the author calls the enclosure of the digital commons.
It's a structural problem, which means we have to change the system, not just our content.
Exactly. And that journey begins by understanding what God first. the mechanism that once fostered real, bidirectional, professional connection.
The social graph.
To really understand this enclosure, we first have to remember the open pasture. The source points to what we could call the golden age of digital connection.
Roughly when was this?
It was, roughly 2008 to 2012. He uses LinkedIn's IPO as a kind of functional marker for that era.
And what was the feeling of that era? What made it feel like a genuine, if imperfect, but a global town square for professionals?
The author gives this perfect anecdote. He says if he posted a complex framework, something about social evolution or organizational design, he wouldn't just get a few likes.
No.
Within hours, he'd be, and this is his quote, 5 layers deep in a threaded debate with colleagues from London to Tokyo.
Wow. So it was dynamic, it was immediate, and it was genuinely peer-to-peer.
That's the key. The conversation was the currency. The content was just the starting gun for the real interaction.
And the technology that was driving that whole environment was rooted in something called the social graph. This is the old logic. This is the logic that just evaporated.
The social graph was, in hindsight, structurally transparent. It was very human-centric. The logic was so simple.
You follow Bill, you see what Bill says.
That was it. The platforms prioritized declared relationships. If you actively chose to connect with someone or follow an account, the platform's core directive was just to deliver that account's output directly to your stream.
So if I was interested in systems theory, I'd go follow the 10 most insightful systems theorists I could find.
Right.
And my feed would be defined by my intention, my curation, my own professional trust.
Precisely. Trust was transitive. Connection was the core currency. It was like a digital map built on the topology of actual, or at least intended, professional relationships. The algorithm back then was mostly just a delivery mechanism. It was designed to respect your choices.
But then, around 2016, the whole field just changed. And, we have to address the counter-argument here. You could say, wait a minute. The platforms that stuck to the social graph, like early Facebook or Twitter, they were struggling to monetize. Isn't adapting to maximize retention just, good business? Can we really blame them for trying to stay viable?
And that's a fundamentally fair question. Of course, companies have to survive. And yes, the platforms that relied only on the social graph, they did struggle with user fatigue. You might run out of new things from your friends pretty quickly. But the source argues that the method of adaptation, which is driven in large part by the explosive, totally unexpected success of TikTok, had catastrophic consequences for discourse.
TikTok was the catalyst. It proved you didn't need any pre-existing social ties to get astronomical engagement.
That's it. That's where the structural flip happened.
And the big platforms saw this.
Yes. The LinkedIns, the X's, all of them. They saw the retention numbers TikTok was getting, and they realized they were leaving billions of dollars of attention on the table by sticking to that outdated social graph logic.
So they made the shift.
They made the shift to the interest graph.
The new algorithmic director.
And the algorithm just stopped caring who you knew. Relationship mapping was immediately de-emphasized. The primary optimization shifted away from fostering connection toward maximizing retention.
Just keeping you on the app.
That's the only thing that mattered. What kept your eyes glued to the screen for the longest possible time? Cycle after 15-second cycle.
And this is where the conversation turns into one of. It's almost like digital physics, this idea of a thermodynamic system and the concept of friction.
Friction, yeah. In this context, friction is just cognitive load. It's the amount of energy required for you, the user, to engage with a piece of content. And the interest graph is inherently, structurally biased against anything with high friction.
Okay, so let's use the author's example. What's a high-friction example?
A 500-word, thoughtful, nuanced paragraph about systems theory.
Okay, to process that, I have to actually stop my scroll. I have to dedicate serious attention. I have to read dense text, parse complex ideas, maybe synthesize the argument with what I already know. That is a massive commitment of cognitive energy. That's high friction.
A huge commitment. And what does the algorithm see when you pause to think? It just sees a hesitation, a delay, a moment where you might just, minimize the app and return to reality.
Which is the enemy.
It's the enemy. The algorithm is rewarded for reducing friction to zero.
So that thoughtful paragraph has absolutely no chance against the low-friction example.
None. Zero. The low-friction content is designed to be immediately digestible. It's that 15-second video with high-contrast visuals, really fast cuts, and language specifically chosen to trigger an instant emotional response.
Usually outrage or fear.
Or a cheap hit of dopamine. This kind of content requires zero cognitive load, it maximizes instant gratification, and it's perfectly optimized for endless retention.
It's just a fundamental mismatch then. The needs of a professional who wants to foster a sophisticated debate, which requires that high friction, are diametrically opposed to the needs of the platform, which requires zero friction for its own survival.
And the consequence is just catastrophic. That crucial feedback loop between intellectual peers, it's been severed. We are no longer a decentralized, resilient network of nodes exchanging nuanced signals. We've been fundamentally restructured.
The source puts it so perfectly. He says, we are now an audience of millions staring at a stage managed by an algorithmic director.
That's it. Our role went from being an active participant to just a passive consumer of a curated performance.
And if your signal, your thoughtful post, doesn't meet the algorithmic director's criteria for maximizing retention, which usually means generating enough low-friction outrage or dopamine.
It just gets filtered out. It vanishes from the performance space.
Yeah.
And what you're left with is that lonely, blinking cursor. The silence is the sound of the friction being removed from the network.
That is, wow. It's a really sobering realization. The quality of your signal is completely irrelevant if the transmission mechanism has been optimized to ignore signals that require thought.
Right.
But that leaves a massive question hanging in the air.
Right.
If the algorithm is filtering out the smart people, where did all the smart people go?
That's the perfect transition.
Yeah.
Because the interest graph explains why you don't see your connections anymore. But the next step is understanding the environmental toxicity that caused those connections to flee the public eye in the first place.
Which brings us to the dark forest theory.
Exactly.
And as we mentioned, this is rooted in science fiction, which I think gives it this wonderfully accessible hook.
It does. It was coined by Yancey Strickler, and he was drawing conceptual inspiration from Lou Sixon's brilliant and often terrifying trilogy, The Three-Body Problem.
So to get the digital analogy, we have to first understand the cosmic one.
We do. In Sixon's universe, there are two principles that govern all interstellar life. First, resources are finite, and second, the intent of any other civilization you encounter. It has to be assumed hostile.
Why hostile? That seems so pessimistic.
Well, the logic is brutal, because if a civilization is detected and you don't destroy it immediately, that civilization will inevitably evolve to destroy you in the future to secure those scarce resources.
So the only logical self-preserving action is a preemptive strike.
Always. It's a survival logic based on perpetual existential threat.
The universe, therefore, is a dark forest.
Exactly. Every civilization is a hunter, perfectly camouflaged and totally silent. The instant you broadcast your location, your signal, you are inviting destruction. Silence is the only survival strategy. To broadcast is to invite destruction.
That is a terrifyingly accurate metaphor for the public internet in 2025.
It really is. The public internet has devolved into a digital dark forest, and the predators are real and they are active. We're talking about malicious trolls, automated bot swarms, the devastating impact of cancel culture, and the pervasive risk of what's called context collapse.
Okay, let's pause on context collapse for a second, because the source is identified as a primary driver of this retreat, but it's a term that gets thrown around as jargon. What does it actually mean in practice?
In practice, context collapse is what happens when content that you created for a very specific, narrow, trusted audience, let's say 50 of your professional peers, who all share deep domain knowledge, is suddenly ripped out of that intended frame.
And viewed by a hostile universal audience of millions.
Right. And when that happens, all the nuance, all the inside jokes, the challenging premises, the shared assumptions, they're all stripped away.
So a challenging, maybe even provocative intellectual question that you pose to your peers, something that would prompt a really thoughtful debate in a private forum. It becomes a viral, decontextualized piece of evidence for outrage on a public feed.
Precisely. You lose complete control of the narrative, the intent, and the audience. And once your content is weaponized and used against you by a mass audience that lacks that critical context, the damage to your reputation, to your career, it can be devastating.
So the professional learns very quickly, the cost of broadcasting a nuanced signal is just too high.
It's way too high. So if you are a serious professional or a critical thinker, posting a high-friction thought onto the public feeds it's no longer communication. It is actively inviting a context collapse event or trolls or just algorithmic redirection into a flame war.
The survival instinct dictates silence.
And the result is the tactical retreat. Intelligent discourse hasn't vanished from the web. It's moved underground.
And this leads us to the definition of dark social. This is where the real intellectual work and the genuine community are now flourishing.
Dark social refers to all those digital spaces that are intentionally difficult for algorithms and predators to penetrate. We're talking about private, often invite-only discords,
Curated Slack channels for specific industries.
encrypted WhatsApp groups, password-protected email newsletters, small forums.
And these environments provide what the public feed absolutely cannot: context safety and controlled density.
That control is everything. In a small, vetted, private group, you know the participants. You can assume a high baseline of shared knowledge and shared intent. You can speculate, you can challenge premises, you can debate. Without that immediate paralyzing fear of context collapse or the intrusion of automated noise.
The signal-to-noise ratio is actually manageable.
It's manageable, it's human.
It's fascinating how quickly the digital ecology adapted to this. The source notes that the public feed is now reduced primarily to a performance space for announcements or algorithmic slop.
Yeah, that's a great phrase, algorithmic slop.
It's where you post the marketing copy or the polished finished product.
But the real messy intellectual collaboration, that 5 layers deep debate that used to happen out in the open, that is strictly behind closed doors now. The open digital commons has ceased to be a workshop for ideas. It is merely a theater for presentation.
So when you, the professional listener, post your thoughtful piece and you feel that silence, it's not because your peers aren't reading good content.
No.
It's because your peers are reading it privately, maybe in a niche newsletter or a dedicated Slack, and they're debating it in a safe space.
Exactly. The public silence is simply confirmation that the intelligent core has fled the toxic environment.
And this flight just reinforces the cycle, doesn't it?
Oh, completely. As the thoughtful professionals retreat, the public space becomes even more dominated by low-friction, high-outrage content and synthetic algorithmic activity, which then further justifies the initial retreat.
The dark forest just grows darker.
It does.
Okay, so we've covered the filter, the interest graph,
Yeah.
and the flight, the dark forest. Now we need to address the third structural element, the sheer volume of non-human engagement that makes a public space so unbearable, the noise.
This brings us right back to the power of that 1982 analogy. Back then, the signal-to-noise ratio was, for all intents and purposes, infinite.
Because there was no noise.
There was no noise, the author was alone, but his signal was pure. Today, the noise level is functionally infinite.
And this overwhelming synthetic volume, this leads us to the, frankly, terrifying implications of the dead internet theory. Now, even if you think the theory is a bit hyperbolic,
And some do.
the core assertion that much of what we interact with is not human is critical to understand.
The source material is very clear on the scale of this competitive environment. By current estimates, over half of all web traffic in 2025 is bot-driven.
Over half.
Over half. Now, that includes essential traffic like crawlers, sure. But critically, it also includes a massive amount of automated content generation and simulated engagement.
So when I sit down and write a careful 1,000-word analysis, I am not competing against a finite number of other human writers.
No, you're not. You're competing with legions of sophisticated LLMs generating synthetic content, synthetic replies, synthetic reactions, all of it optimized specifically to game the interest graph algorithm.
This just changes the entire dynamic of online publishing.
Yeah.
It's no longer a competitive marketplace of human ideas. It's a battle against an automated, tireless entity that's designed for maximum volume and maximum algorithm reward.
And these automated systems, they excel at generating low-friction outrage and key phrase triggers far, far faster than any human possibly can.
The environment isn't just crowded, it's fundamentally synthetic. And the resulting psychological consequence for the human participant is what the author identifies as the behavioral sink.
This concept is absolutely crucial, and we really need to understand its origins to appreciate its power. The term behavioral sink doesn't come from tech. It comes from mid-20th century sociological experiments.
From John B. Calhoun, right? The mouse universe experiments.
Exactly. Most famously, the experiment known as Universe 25.
You have to explain the premise of Universe 25 because the parallel to our digital world is just startling.
It's chilling. So Calhoun created this utopia for mice. Perfect temperature, limitless food, limitless water, absolutely no predators, and endless nesting material. The only constraint was space, and eventually, population density.
So at first, everything was great.
Initially, the population thrived. They exhibited normal, healthy mouse social behavior.
But once the population reached a certain density, what happened?
Pathological behavior emerged. Even with unlimited resources, the population collapsed into chaos. The high density led to the total breakdown of complex social structures.
In what way?
Mice stopped building nests, they stopped caring for their young. Infanticide became common, they ceased all their normal mating rituals, and they developed chronic stress and violence. They just retreated into this catatonic state, only leaving their immediate vicinity to eat.
So they were physically present in this environment of total abundance, yet they experienced a complete social breakdown because of the sheer density and the constant, meaningless, overwhelming social pressure.
That's the key right there. The constant high-density interaction became toxic. And the resulting pathology was the behavioral sink collapse into social dysfunction and apathy.
And the digital parallel is immediate. We are swimming in a world of limitless information and connection, but the density of the content, especially the synthetic noise, it creates this chronic fatigue.
And the fatigue is often subconscious. We sense. We just feel that the person arguing with us in the comment section, using all the boilerplate outrage language, we sense they might just be a script.
Right.
We feel the sheer volume of low-quality, synthetic, or algorithmically driven rage-bait comments, creating this state of digital entropy, a sense that the entire system is just dissolving into chaos.
And we realize that dedicating our cognitive energy to defending a nuanced point against an LLM-driven response is pointless.
Yeah.
The effort-to-reward ratio is non-existent.
Why would you expend the human effort necessary to change a mind when the entity on the other side might not even possess one?
So the natural human survival response, mirroring Calhoun's mice, is radical disengagement.
Exactly. We stop commenting, we stop posting, and we execute that final tactical retreat. The conclusion of the behavioral sink is simple and it's devastating. We let the bots talk to the bots.
And every single professional who stops posting because they feel this intense psychological fatigue, they further dilute the human signal in the public feed, which just accelerates the entire process.
The silence isn't apathy, it is sensory self-preservation in the face of impossible entropy.
So if the adults are feeling the behavioral sink and retreating to the dark forest, we really have to look at how the next generation is coping. Because the structural forces, the filter, the danger, the noise, they're far more intense for them.
And the author provides this fantastic, observable snapshot of this survival adaptation. It's the scene of students on any university campus today.
Describe that scene, because it's instantly recognizable on any quad.
The picture is hyper-modern. You see students gliding across the quad, often on electric scooters, and there are two key features. Their eyes are locked on screens, and they are sealed in with these massive over-the-ear headphones.
They're physically moving, but they're mentally and sensorially completely isolated.
Yes. And the immediate, the knee-jerk reaction from older generations is often to label this as antisocial or just rude. But the author, viewing it through his systems lens, he completely rejects that simple label.
He says this isn't a moral failure.
Not at all. It is a profound survival adaptation to an information environment that is actively hostile to focused thought. They have become masters of cognitive load management.
They're deploying a technological and a physical Faraday cage against all the surrounding noise.
Precisely. A physical Faraday cage blocks electromagnetic fields. Their adaptation blocks the mental electromagnetic noise, the constant barrage of notifications, the algorithmic hooks designed to steal their attention, and the friction of the physical environment itself, which is constantly competing with their digital focus.
So the physical world, which used to be what demanded our attention, is now often viewed as a source of friction to be blocked out. They're actively filtering reality to maintain their cognitive coherence.
This is where we have to bring in Sherry Turkle's prescient observation. She said they are the generation that is alone together.
Alone together.
They're physically present in a group in a lecture hall on the quad, yet they are mentally isolated by their technology.
So their connection hasn't been severed at all. It's just been radically redirected and curated.
They are hyper-connected, but only to a very specific curated list of digital nodes. Their private group chats, their trusted discords, their dark social communities. They have engineered a secure bubble for communication while at the same time being completely disconnected from the messy, entropic physical system immediately surrounding them.
They've prioritized the safety and the signal clarity of their managed digital network over the noise and friction of their physical surroundings and the public feeds.
It's a pragmatic, systems-level response to digital chaos. They aren't antisocial, they are selectively connected. And that selection requires these massive visible shields.
And if the youngest, most digitally native generation has to deploy physical and digital cages just to manage their attention, it provides a terrifying measure of the toxicity and the noise levels in the public digital commons, where the older generation is still trying to conduct sophisticated discourse.
It just confirms that the system is broken for deep work.
Okay, so we've established the mechanisms of digital decay and the survival responses. Now, the author zooms out completely. As a systems thinker, the goal is to look for isomorphisms,
Right.
structural similarities across entirely different levels of complexity, from social media all the way to astrophysics.
And this is where the analysis becomes truly profound, because he utilizes a metaphor from modern cosmology, dark matter. And we need to understand the physics metaphor deeply to really grasp its digital application.
So walk us through the cosmological problem that dark matter was invented to solve.
The puzzle begins with the fundamental observation of galaxies. We can see the visible matter, the stars, the gas, the dust. And using the known laws of gravity, physicists can calculate the mass of that galaxy, and from that, how fast it should be spinning.
And the observation doesn't match the calculation.
It's not even close. It's wildly off. Galaxies spin much, much faster than their visible mass allows for. If the visible matter were the only source of gravity, the outer stars and the gas clouds would be immediately flung out into the void.
The galaxy would just disintegrate.
It would. It doesn't have enough visible gravity to hold itself together.
So the system, based on everything we can see, should be collapsing or flying apart. Yet it remains structurally coherent.
Exactly. So the only possible conclusion is that there must be massive amounts of mass that we cannot see. And this invisible, non-interacting mass is what they call dark matter.
It provides the necessary gravitational scaffolding.
It does. It comprises the vast majority of the universe's matter, yet it's completely invisible to our telescopes because they only detect electromagnetic radiation, light, radio waves, that sort of thing.
So it's the invisible foundation that holds the entire cosmic structure intact. Now, let's apply this powerful model to the internet system.
The author argues that the internet is behaving exactly like a galaxy that should be flying apart. When we look at the visible internet, the public feeds that are optimized by the interest graph, what do we see?
We see entropy and noise. We see the hot gas of the bots and the radiation of rage bait and synthetic slop. It looks chaotic, toxic, and structurally dissolving.
And if this visible spectrum were the only thing happening, then human intellectual progress, science, culture, it should all be collapsing into incoherence.
But it's not.
It's not. And that's the paradox the source points out. The system hasn't collapsed. Scientific progress continues. Complex professional work still advances. Culture is still evolving. Why the structural coherence?
The answer is the synthesis of the metaphor. The intelligence has become dark matter.
The coherent core of thinkers, the thoughtful professionals, the serious students, the experts, they are still operating. They haven't left the intellectual galaxy. They're still providing the gravity, but they have executed a large-scale tactical cloaking maneuver.
They've retreated behind their event horizons.
Yeah.
Into those private, secure, and encrypted channels, the dark social networks we talked about.
And this is the crucial differentiation. Dark social is the location, the environment. Dark matter is the intelligence, the activity, and the gravitational mass. The intelligence is working in spaces where the algorithm and the public eye cannot detect it.
So what does this dark matter intellectual work actually look like in the real world? This is the work that provides that structural coherence, but never ever touches the public feed.
Well, think about highly proprietary corporate research that's debated on encrypted enterprise platforms like a secure Slack.
Okay.
Think about academic peer review that happens entirely within closed university networks. Think about the high-value paid intellectual property debates that occur only within small, specialized paid forums or email lists.
So this is all high-friction, high-value work.
And it's absolutely necessary to maintain the integrity of their fields, yet it is utterly invisible to the algorithmic public.
They are the invisible gravity holding the structure together. They're continuing the complex, essential work, the signal, but it's completely non-interacting with the noisy spectrum.
To the naked eye of the algorithm, which only sees clicks and likes and outrage metrics, this critical mass of coherent intelligence simply doesn't exist.
So the silence we feel isn't a lack of intelligent life.
No, it's proof that intelligent life has adopted a superior, cloaked survival mechanism.
This just flicks the entire script for you, the listener. The feeling of invisibility is not an indictment of your ideas. It's a confirmation that your ideas are too valuable, too nuanced, and too high friction to survive in the visible entropic void.
And the resulting course correction is so clear. Stop trying to compete in the visible entropic chaos. Follow the intelligence into the dark matter channels.
So we started with the author's goal, to name this phenomenon and assure the professional who feels invisible that they aren't suffering from some personal failure.
Right.
They are a victim of a system that has shifted.
And that fundamental shift, it can be defined by the change in the platform's core function, a shift that dictates the entire user experience.
The platform shifted from communication, which was a high-friction, bidirectional exchange of ideas designed to foster connection and shared learning,
To broadcast, a low-friction, unidirectional performance optimized strictly for retention and for generating only surface-level, synthetic, or emotional engagement. The system evolved to serve advertisers, not thinkers.
Let's bring back that powerful final contrast, the island metaphor that just summarizes this structural transformation between 1982 and 2025.
In 1982, the author sat alone with his Timex Sinclair 1000 because the digital bridges. They hadn't been built yet. The infrastructure just didn't exist to connect him to the intellectual community. It was a world of technological potential just waiting to be linked.
But in 2025, the author sits alone with his powerful smartphone because the bridges have been flooded. The infrastructure is all there, the fiber, the global networks, but it's been rendered unusable for meaningful communication because it's overwhelmed by noise, by predators, and by algorithmic redirection toward conflict and performance.
The challenge then for the listener, for the critical thinker, the professional, the bridge generation, is to regain agency. And the solution is definitively not to just shout louder into the void.
Because that only feeds the noise machine.
And it exacerbates the behavioral sink.
So if the public feeds are enclosed and they're toxic, how do we find the new frequencies? How do we build those campfires in the dark forests? We need some concrete, actionable examples here.
Okay. First, radical self-curation. This means prioritizing intellectual inputs that have inherent friction built into their distribution model.
What does that mean?
It means if someone charges a fee for their newsletter or their community, that fee acts as a filter against the noise. It immediately increases the signal-to-noise ratio. You are paying for safety and for context.
So prioritizing paid, curated communities over the free, ad-supported public feeds.
Absolutely. Second, think physically, not just digitally. The source talks about the importance of the campfire. This means seeking out structured, small group retreats or local meetups where physical proximity guarantees focused, high-friction, bidirectional exchange.
That human connection provides the trust foundation that the dark forest requires.
It does. And technologically, it means using encrypted or private group chat systems where the algorithm isn't listening for keywords to maximize conflict. Using tools that are designed for work and communication, not for performance and broadcast.
We have to remember that crucial distinction.
We must. We must stop attempting to communicate and conduct complex intellectual debate in spaces that have been optimized solely for broadcast performance and retention. We have to follow the intelligence into the structural safety of the dark matter.
It's an exercise in taking back control of your information diet and your intellectual output. The digital commons has been enclosed, but we can still build our own private intellectual sanctuaries.
And that brings us to the final provocative thought for you, the listener, to mull over as you navigate this new digital structure.
While the algorithm controls the visible feed, it controls the visibility, the noise, the performance metrics. It absolutely does not control the mind, the curiosity, or the intellectual capacity of the dark matter.
The coherent core is still out there, operating freely. Your challenge is not to change the algorithm. Your challenge is to identify precisely what the new frequencies look like in your own professional life, knowing that the most valuable information will likely be the hardest to find and the safest to debate. The signal is still out there. You just have to build a new, quieter receiver.
Thanks for joining us for the deep dive.